Howdy ho ho, my good humans. How the hell are you doing? This is Unnecessary Rambling. I'm Brandon Sylvia. I appreciate y'all for tuning in to talk some hidden gems. All that shit kind of rhymed, eh? So today I'm going through and talking about the most underrated games of 2023. My PS5 and Series X 2023 hidden gems. Games that released in 2023 that I think are kind of overlooked, a bit slept on. That's the thing with the term hidden gems, with the term most underrated games. I always try to preface, and give this statement before I ever make a video regarding anything relating to hidden gem, underrated game. We all have different definitions for that shit. I'm just trying to highlight some games that may not have been on your radar, some games that you may have heard weren't all that great, and I might have a slightly different take on it. So, yeah. That's what we're doing here today. Most underrated games of 2023 that I have personally played. Also, stay tuned for the community polls. I'll have some B-roll running for you so you can kind of get an idea of what I am talking about. But we'll be doing the Game of the Year community poll, or I guess I should say polls. There will be about 13 of them, 10 for like the first round kind of, and then the winner of those 10 polls. So it'll be essentially 2 more polls of 5 games on each poll, and then the winner of those 2 polls will go on to the finals. Pretty simple and self-explanatory. And I went over the behind the scenes process a bit more of how I came up with this list in the last Rambling Reviews episode. So if you want to hear more details about that, you can go watch that. Essentially, I just randomized it. I took 50 of the most beloved, kind of critically acclaimed titles of the year, put them into a random list generator, and it spit out a new list of 50. And then I went 5 by 5 by 5 by 5, 10 different times, and then got our polls lined up that way. But it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to do like a little award show at the end of the year, my own little unnecessary game award show, and whatever you guys vote as your personal game of the year, that'll kind of be like the grand finale of the show. I'll reveal your game of the year, the community game of the year. So I'm really excited to see what you guys vote on. All right, but that is enough of the rambling. It's time to get into the most underrated games of 2023 that I have played personally. And I'm going to try to rapid fire run through these because I got a pretty damn big list here to go over. 2023 was just such a stacked year for like the big juggernauts, and a lot of these AA indie titles and some 6 out of 10s and 7 out of 10s, they kind of get slept on in a year that's full of 9 out of 10s and 10 out of 10s. And I got like over 20 games I want to shout out, so I don't want to make this an hour long. But to kick it off, out the gate, a game that I think is on the lesser end of underrated. I think it got quite a bit of attention, but I think the fact that it wasn't nominated for Game of the Year, it just goes to show you how good of a year 2023 is, because I think if Hi-Fi Rush was released in pretty much any other year, it would be nominated in the final 6 for Game of the Year. This is something truly, truly special. It's essentially a character action game that is all about rhythm and timing and how everything is on beat in this game. You see Chai snapping his fingers the whole time, but the whole world is on a similar beat. It feels like it's all so alive and meshed together, so in sync with one another. And I mean, from the character action gameplay to this cartoon, a Saturday morning cartoon brought to life with a team that just does not make this style of game ever. The Tango Gameworks, the creators of the Evil Within 1 and 2, coming out and making something just totally different, flexing on a different level. And yeah, it's a really special game. Pacing is incredible. You can get through it in 7-8 hours or so. If you have Game Pass, absolutely check out Hi-Fi Rush. It's such a bummer that it doesn't have a physical copy, because I mean, the art style alone, that's a physical copy that you want sitting on your shelf. Next up, I want to mention another one that came out really early in the year, and that is Scars Above. It's like a third-person shooter, somewhat Returnal inspired gameplay loop with a lot of cool environmental kills. Like you can lure an enemy over to like an icy area and shoot your fire gun at the ice, and it traps this big ass monster inside the ice. It has a surprisingly deep narrative, and by the end of it, I was like really invested in what was going on. It's one of those it's one of those stories that hits you with a good narrative up front, and then it leaves the middle kind of, you're wanting more in the middle. There's not a ton of real narrative going on there, and then it caps off with a big narrative moment. But the gameplay throughout is really fun. It's kind of just an old school linear third person shooter. It does borrow some Souls checkpointing systems that can be a little bit on the annoying side, but all in all, it's just a really cool, sci-fi shooter that has some decent production value, and it feels very old school in its entire design philosophy. Next up, I gotta shout out a narrative that really, really stuck with me this year, and that is A Space for the Unbound. It's a, kind of old school NES adventure style experience. You're going off and talking to the different townspeople, and they're sending you off on different quests. And it was a really small Indonesian development team who cranked out A Space for the Unbound, and you could tell that it was a very personal story that was on offer here, that was wanting to be told here, and I just really appreciated that passion. And it's like deceptively dark at times, and where they go, it often leaves me kind of shocked, almost in a weird, the comparison is it won't make sense until you play the game, but it had Kojima vibes at times, where it's like, holy shit, how did we just end up going here from where we were? Like, it really takes some risks narratively, and I definitely appreciate that, while also, it's in that same vein with Kojima of having super, super serious dark moments, and then super silly, just kind of juvenile comedic moments. It's a great blend of both, and I think the art style is exceptional here. It's not a game with like crazy mechanics or anything like that. It is very much in the vein of, your old school adventure games, where you're just kind of running around and talking to different characters, and there's some very light combat mechanics thrown in there, where you meet like a mixed martial arts master, and he teaches you the ropes, and you're able to do these little quick time events, but it's nothing overly elaborate. It's just a really, really great, like very memorable, strange story, and I appreciate that. Next up, we can move into one that I literally just finished, and that is Viewfinder. This really hit me. I was super, super surprised by this. It's a first-person puzzle-solving style of experience. Think something like a Portal, but the art style on offer with Viewfinders really, really special, and the perspective swapping, the constant perspective swapping, is unlike much of anything you'll ever play. You're taking photos of the game world, and then you are able to use these photos to you bring the photos to life in the real world, and you use those pictures to essentially solve puzzles to get you from the platform you're on to the platform you're trying to reach. But it goes so much deeper than that the more you play it, and you're swapping from the real world into like a Mario level, into a Tetris level, into a forest, into a castle, and these constant perspective swapping scenarios are just hitting you one after another, and it leaves you in awe time and time again. It's a really, really impressive game on all technical fronts, and the fact that these perspective swapping scenarios are happening one after another, and there's like no loading times or anything, it's really, really a sight to behold on a technical level. And next up is one that for a while was really close to my game of the year, and it might still be somewhere in that top 5-ish range. Tune in later on in the month when I'll go through and rank every game that I played in 2023. But Dredge is something really, really special. A survival horror game where you are playing as a captain of a boat. You're taking your boat out. You're doing some fishing. You're bringing it back to the fish merchant. You're doing some dredging. You're taking your findings to the pawn shop. You're tackling the deep seas, and you might run into some H.P. Lovecraftian inspired monsters who only come out at night, and you're upgrading your boat to be able to handle, some of those more dangerous waters, to handle some of the more dangerous terrain that you may end up exploring. exploring and having different solutions to avoid these monsters. And I don't want to get into any spoilers, but let's just say you get some abilities that are a little on the supernatural side. I'll leave it there. You get one early on, but they continue to evolve over the course of the game, and you meet a bunch of interesting characters while you're off exploring. And it's not a super narrative rich, narrative heavy game, but there are some little interesting narrative threads to pull at there. Dredge is just a concept that not in my wildest dreams would I ever have imagined being so perfect for a horror game, to be the captain of a boat. And if you think about it, though, it is kind of perfect. How scary is the sea? You're out at sea late at night, you can't see anything, and you got to go and upgrade your lighting rig for your boat. You got to go and upgrade your engine to make sure you can, if a shark's on your ass, you got to get to shore pretty damn quickly. These are things that are just naturally terrifying. And those moments where you find yourself kind of stranded out at sea in Dredge, it is actually kind of panic inducing, which, once again, when you look at the art style, when you look at what you're doing on a gameplay front, you would think there's no way this is going to be scary. And it somehow manages to kind of spook you out a little bit. So yeah, Dredge is really, really something special. I definitely one of my favorite games of the year. And continuing off of that, another one of my favorite horror games of the year is Killer Frequency, another horror game that I think is just wholly unique, very, very interesting. You're playing as, I think you're in the 70s, and you're playing as a disc jockey for a small local radio station. You were like a big city disc jockey, and something happened and you ended up getting fired, and you're looking for a gig, and you find this small town who's hiring for a disc jockey, and you go and apply there, you get the job. And like the main hook of the game is that you get a call from the police early on, and there's this murder on the loose, and they're rewiring, they're rerouting the 911 hotlines to the radio station. That way everybody in the town can be kept up to speed as, people are calling in, be like, oh, I think I just saw the murder. The murder's on the loose over here at, left friggin' turn Boulevard, 301 Street. And so everybody in the town's like, okay, well, I know I can't go over to left turn 301 Street. But you're helping people throughout the game. You're making decisions for people. You're solving puzzles for people. Okay, the killer, we're in this apartment with the killer. Now, where should what room should I go to next? Should I make noise? Should I not make noise? You're doing all these little things to try to get people to safety. And it's one of those games where, like, there's no fail state. So if you fuck up and you just keep going, they do have, you can save the game manually and just go back. But if you want to just kind of live with your decisions, there's no fail state. So you just keep going on, and you can get everybody in the damn town killed who calls your line. And not to mention, it's just such a vibey ass game. You got the vinyl all over the place. You're taking the record out, putting it on the record player. You're spinning the tracks. You got callers calling in, and you have to manually swap to the next call. You press the button, they're on air. Now you're communicating with the caller. It's just such a very honed in, specific experience that is trying to be nothing other than what it is. And it succeeds like 100% at what it's going for. It is such a immersive experience. I guess we might as well stay on the theme of horror here and talk about Bramble the Mountain King. This is kind of like a Little Nightmares, inside inspired title. I guess you could call it a puzzler / platformer. But the main thing that hooked me with Bramble the Mountain King is that it is incredibly dark. Like, one of the darkest games, maybe the darkest game that I played all year. At least in terms of deceptively dark, this is the game that made me the most squeamish all year. Like, there's moments, and I won't spoil anything, where I'm just like, oh my god, did they really just do that? So definitely heed that warning. It's not a game for people who... I don't even really want to give like the trigger warnings away, because it could be a spoiler, but I'll just say, if you don't like excessive violence, and if you are somebody who is easily shocked, and you don't enjoy that kind of obscene brand of shock value, then Bramble the Mountain King might not be for you. But this thing, it is swinging for the fences, and as squeamish as it made me at times, I just appreciated the shit out of the balls that this game had. And I don't say that and mean that there's like not actual substance there too. The gameplay is really good. The production value is surprisingly strong. The story is pretty damn unique. Some of the boss encounters, like some of the enemies, the scale of these enemies, it's crazy for a game that's working on this budget. The platforming is smooth. You have full-on boss fights and shit, something that you really don't have in your typical smaller scale puzzler platformer style game. This game constantly swings for the fences in a myriad of different areas, from gameplay to storytelling to shock value. It's really going for it quite regularly in Bramble the Mountain King. And next up is one that really bums me out, just the lack of success that this game found, and that is Immortals of Avium. This is the first person magic based shooter that came from some ex Dead Space developers, some ex Call of Duty developers. It was the EA Originals game, and then it tanked. It tanked commercially. It did okay critically. People seemed to enjoy it for what it was, but it just did not sell well. And I mean, coming out in a year so packed, it's hard to blame people necessarily. But this is, if you love the days of old, the first person shooters of old, getting you in and out of a story in less than 20 hours, and it being, I mean, people complain about fucking everything, but a lot of people were saying that the dialogue sucks in Immortals of Avium. I didn't necessarily think that. It definitely has some of that Marvel quippy humor attached to it, but if you're not totally put off by that, there's a lot to enjoy with this story. It's presented incredibly well. The cinematics are very strong. The character models look great in the cinematic moments. You have cool puzzles where you can like bend the environment, and they get more and more complex as you go along, and they're actually fun. They're like movement-based puzzles that you're solving. It's not your very typical kind of guided puzzles that we've seen a lot of in the last few years. There is a lot of thought put into, and it's also, that's the cool thing, is there aren't a ton of puzzles. So if you're just wanting to play a straight up really solid first person shooter, that's there. They have a few puzzles sprinkled in throughout the game, nothing overly intrusive to the experience, and when they are there, they feel like truly well thought out and well executed. And I mean, it just feels AAA as fuck. There's certain environments in this world, there's certain moments in this game that's like, God damn, that they sunk some real money into this thing. And sometimes, I don't know, I just get into the mood every now and then where I just want to see some like crazy spectacles in a game, and this definitely provides you with quite a few of those. And next up, talking about art style, art direction, art design, whatever you want to call it, Planet of Lana has some of my favorite visuals of the year. This thing visually is an absolute treat, man. It's another Limbo inspired title. It's a 2D side scrolling puzzler platformer, but what really stands out about Planet of Lana is just how vibrant this game is. It's so goddamn vibrant, and the world is threatening at times, but you always feel so drawn in and like welcomed by the presentation, by the art style. It just has a warm feeling to it, and that's hard to explain, but when I'll have obviously a trailer rolling so you can see what the game looks like. It is just a world you want to be in. Minus the alien robots that are trying to fucking kill you, but outside of that, or capture you, outside of that, it is such a welcoming feeling that you get from the world. And it's another one that is very minimalistic across the board, but you actually do end up really caring. You get like a companion who helps you solve puzzles, and the puzzle solving is very simple in Planet of Lana. It's one of those things where if you ever do end up looking up a guide to find the solution to an area where you were stuck, you're like, ah, damn it, I could have figured that out. And to me, that's the best feeling while playing a puzzle game, because if I look up a guide and the solution is something I never in my wildest dreams would have ever been able to figure out, I'm just like, well, shit, now I kind of feel stupid and I don't know if I want to keep playing this thing. But whatever, it's a solution that is right there in front of me, and I just didn't think a couple layers deep enough to find it. I'm engaged to want to continue on because I'm like, I can figure this out. This damn game isn't too smart for me. And I mean, it's only a few hours long, like maybe 4-5 hours long or so. It's a breeze to get through. The pacing is incredible. Yeah, Planet of Lana is, once again, I think it's still on Game Pass. I know it was on Game Pass when I checked it out. It absolute must play if you are a fan of puzzlers, platformers, and you own or you have access to Game Pass. And next up, I gotta give a shout out to Thirsty Suitors, man. Just the originality that is on offer with Thirsty Suitors is so special. It's a turn-based RPG meets a dating sim meets a skateboarding game, and also a pretty wholesome story about forgiveness and forgiving yourself. And it's just one of the more unique video games I have played in a really long time. And even for someone like me who isn't a fan of turn-based combat, they were able to incorporate enough action elements into the mix to keep me feeling engaged and having, some QTEs thrown in there, just enough to spice it up to keep things feeling somewhat active, opposed to just, selecting your attacks from the menu screen. But yeah, I mean, the originality, the uniqueness of this game is off the charts. It really does feel like a Double Fine game in a lot of ways. It's so special. And next up, I have to give a shout out to Fort Solis. I got to give a shout out to this for a couple different reasons. For one, I kind of underestimated this game before it released, and I was thinking that it was going to be a bit of a dud. There just wasn't a lot of real gameplay footage shown of this game before it released. But after playing it, I now understand why there wasn't much gameplay footage of Fort Solis before it released. Because all the cool shit in the game is kind of a spoiler. Essentially, to boil it down into a really quick sentence, is Fort Solis is Resident Evil without combat. It is a walking sim in the truest sense of that phrase, but the narrative on offer with this thing is top tier. It's really good. Troy Baker, Roger Clark from Red Dead Redemption 2, he was the guy who voiced Arthur Morgan. Troy Baker, obviously the voice of Joel, and then Julia Brown was the other main character in the game, and her performance was top tier as well. Just great performances from everybody in this game. The visuals are stunning, the motion capture is great, ultra realistic, and yeah, it's a straight up narrative game through and through. It's not trying to offer up much more than a really compelling narrative, but the narrative stays compelling throughout the entire game. Oh boy, now talking about legitimately underrated, El Paso Elsewhere. This game is just cool. This is just a cool ass game in every sense of the word. It's a Max Payne inspired third person shooter where you have the bullet time mechanics on offer. You're jumping over a bar, you're jumping through a window, slowing down time, blasting some enemies in the head. You're essentially playing as like a Blade-esque character, and you are going out, you're taking out vampires, you're taking out werewolves and different enemy types. And I mean, the writing in this game is so strong. From the writing with the soundtrack, the lyrics in the soundtrack are phenomenal. The actual writing and voice work, I believe the dude who did the voice work for the main character also wrote all the lyrics and did the rapping, if I'm not mistaken, on this game. But I mean, to have a game, with like the textureless faces that harken back to the PS1 days, to have a game presented in this fashion, but still really be in to what's going on in the story is so goddamn surprising. And throughout the entire game, the story is gripping from front to back. The game maybe overstays its welcome a little bit, but I just think there's a little bit of repetition in the gameplay, but the story is just, it's top notch throughout the entire experience. It's one of the best stories of the year, one of the most well-written games of the year, with maybe my favorite soundtrack of the year. This shit just fucking rules. And I mean, it's only like $20. You cannot go wrong with El Paso Elsewhere. If you have nostalgia for Max Payne and you've been craving something like those old school PS2 games, this is the perfect video game for you. And staying on theme there with nostalgia, RoboCop Rogue City. Finally, any of the RoboCop fans left in the world, they have their dream RoboCop game sitting there and waiting for them on the PS5, on the Series X. This is made by the team who made the Terminator Resistance game, and people who are big fans of Terminator really loved that game, and this seems to be kind of their magnum opus at this point. I haven't played the Terminator Resistance game yet, but after playing damn RoboCop Rogue City, I'm very eager to check out that Terminator game, and I think it has a PS5 copy as well, so I'll be on the lookout for that during Black Friday. But yeah, RoboCop Rogue City, it's a dream RoboCop game. You know what I mean? You're getting to go around and explore, kind of a small scale version of Detroit. You're going off and writing tickets, and you got side quests. You got a great side character quest with a reporter that really can get super, super deep on if you are going to side with her, if you're going to side with the OCP. It totally blew my mind that you were able to make actual narrative decisions in a RoboCop game. Never in my wildest dreams would I have expected that to be a feature in play with this game. But yeah, you got your very slow first-person shooting. You're methodical. You're taking enemies out one by one. It's gory as all hell. Limb dismemberment all over the place. You got tons of environmental kills. There's great environmental destruction on offer. The story's better than it has any right to be. They got a lot of the classic actors from the RoboCop movies from back in the day to come and reprise their role. And I mean, it really is. I'm not a huge RoboCop guy, but from all accounts, this seems to be like a RoboCop fans, like essentially a fan service RoboCop experience. And even as someone who's not a big fan of RoboCop, the game's just really, really fun. I will say, be warned that it was a little bit on the buggier end. When I played it, you could still go through. I still went through, finished the game, so you could get through it, but do be warned. Definitely some bugs, so some things that need to get cleaned up in that experience before I would recommend going out and paying $60 for it. But really fun. Really, really fun. And next up, I'm going to dive into some games that I think are good but not great. Some games that I wouldn't necessarily recommend going out and spending full price on, but still have some redeeming qualities that are worth, highlighting, putting on your radar. And first up in that list is, staying on theme of licensed games that came out this year where I don't really care much about the license, but I had interest in checking out the game. The Expanse from Telltale is next up on that chopping block, and I was more honestly just invested in this. I just wanted to pay Telltale money to ensure that they stayed around so that they could get out The Wolf Among Us 2. I really didn't care much about this Expanse game at all. But I'll say this. The first 2 episodes that I played of the game, I was just not overly into it whatsoever, and then the 3rd episode really hit in a big way, and 4 and 5 to a lesser extent. But I will say that after episode 3, it becomes a pretty much entirely different game. So if any of you are out there who were like me and after episode 2 kind of just took a step back from it, I will say it's worth playing through episode 3 and seeing if you like where that story is progressing towards, because the rest of the game is totally different than the first 2 episodes. And I won't go into any more, detail than that. But yeah, I mean, it's a classic choose your own adventure style game. I do think they sacrifice some of the choosing of your own adventure in the effort to incorporate more, for a lack of a better term here, more expansive gameplay elements where you are able to walk around a lot more and solve some more puzzles and incorporate more QTEs into the gameplay experience. So I think a little bit is lost there by not having a story that you truly feel that multiple times throughout each episode you're making a significant decision. That's kind of the thing that keeps you on the edge of your seat and wanting to continue playing a Telltale game, and that's not on offer in the Expanse as much as it has been with The Enemy Within, with the Batman game, with The Wolf Among Us, with Walking Dead. But regardless, there are some of those big moments still intact, and maybe some people will just like to kind of take in the cozy horror, sci-fi horror vibes, walk around a little bit, do some exploring. Maybe that'll be up some people's alley more than it was mine. And I still found, this would be like a solid 7 out of 10 style game for me. And next up is one, once again, that's very, very chill, very cozy. You're riding around on a bike, taking some photos, and that is for a game called Season: A Letter to the Future. I probably would have put this in the tier above this, the first list of games that I really would recommend, but I ran into a game-breaking bug at the very end of my experience with Season: A Letter to the Future. Like, I was right there at the end, and I ran into a game-breaking bug, and I've went back to it multiple times, waited months and months and months, would go back to it, and to no avail. Nothing would pop up like allowing me to progress from the point I was at. Extremely bizarre, but it definitely wasn't a bad game before that point. I did have some fun going around and decorating my little notebook and kind of taking in these memories. And it seems to be a game that's all about trying to stay present and to remember to like create moments, which is just a good overall message. It's a really pretty game, and I love a good chill walking simulator style experience, but I get tired of just like walking in games. So having the ability just to hop on a bike and that be like the only difference between a straight up walking simulator and having a damn biking simulator experience, I'm like, okay, cool. At least it's something a little bit different, a little bit unique, but it's still a very relaxing, chill video game. And next up, we have probably the weirdest game that I played in 2023, and that is Wanted Dead. This is something else, man. This is coming from some of the ex-Ninja Gaiden developers, and it's staying in line with that, a very kinetic third-person shooter hack and slash style experience, blending some melee combat in there with the shooting. It's just such a bizarre video game. You have side activities galore going on here, kind of with some Yakuza vibes. You have eating mini games. You have arcades that you can go and play. You have shooting gallery. I mean, you have an entire police department for you to go and explore. It's like 3 stories of a police department for you to go and explore. It's fully detailed. You can go and talk to the different, NPCs in the game. It's crazy how much is packed into Wanted Dead, and it's still, I mean, the voice acting is not the world's best by any stretch of the imagination. It's the story is so goddamn off the rails. You have characters that look just like Tom Cruise, that look just like The Rock. You have constant pop culture references that are unintentionally, I don't actually think they're unintentionally hilarious. I think that it is intentional. The comedic writing in this is intentional. It's just presented in a way that is so odd. Like the delivery of the lines, everything about it is just a very, very odd video game. And I think it's worth playing just for the odd experience that it offers up. It's super, super challenging. I played through like half of it with the normal difficulty, and I was getting stomped. And so I just booted it back over, played it on easy, played through it just to see where the hell they were going to take this story. And I highly recommend just playing through it on easy. It is absolutely worth experiencing, especially if you can get it for pretty cheap. But that's the thing, it's like one of those games that's hard to just outright recommend 100% because it's nothing about it is of some really high quality bar. It's just so chaotic and different that like I said, I think it's worth seeking out. And now going back to licensed games that were surprisingly good this year, and once again another license that I don't care a lot about, another IP that I don't care a lot about, and that is Star Trek Resurgence. I wanted to play this because the developer is some ex Telltale employees that went out and started their own company. And I always try to keep my eye on ex-employees from a developmental team that I really enjoyed. I always try to keep my eye on their next project, or if they're going off and starting up a new studio. And that's really the only reason I bought Star Trek Resurgence. And this is a pretty solid overall experience. It definitely captures a lot of the magic that makes Telltale games special, so I'll be very intrigued to see where this team goes moving forward. But yeah, I mean, it's a narrative-driven, choice-based experience, and you do have some shooting on offer that gives you more control, more than just like the QTEs. You have some space exploration that, once again, is very, very minimalistic, but it's cool that it just offers up slightly unique mechanics throughout the experience. You play as a commander and an engineer, and there's a bunch of intergalactic politics at play throughout the experience, and choosing different romance options. It has a lot of those core pillars of what you want from your choice-based adventures, but it spices it up a little bit. It does some more unique things from time to time to just keep that gameplay experience feeling fresh. So yeah, I mean, really, I think this is their first game after leaving Telltale, so really strong first outing. Definitely have my eye on this team. And I don't know if I mentioned the name of the team. The name of the team is Dramatic Labs. So yeah, if you're a Telltale fan, definitely keep your eye on that studio. And next up, I just got to give a quick shout out to this game, Dead Island 2, man. The fact that it came out at all deserves a shout out, and the fact that it came out and was as polished as it is deserves double the shout out. It's just a fun first-person action experience, melee / shooter, and for one, I got to give it credit for the polish, but I also got to give it credit for the fact that there's an entire limb dismemberment technology on offer here, an entire gore physics-based technology where you have never seen a more graphic depiction of limbs being separated from a damn enemy's body part in a video game ever before. It is so violent, so grotesque. I mean, it's up there with your Mortal Kombats and shit like that. It's really, really next level. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't a game that I was just like totally over the moon about, but I was glad to see it be as solid as it was. It's a fun time. And talking about games that are damn surprising, let's move on to Wild Card Football. And I think this is another Embracer title, if I'm not mistaken. I think Saber Interactive was the developer for Wild Card Football. They develop a bunch of shit. But yeah, Wild Card Football, I was not expecting to be as good as it is. It's like a Mario football style experience, but you're able to use NFL players, some NFL players who are, part of the NFLPA. And it's some really big names, your Jalen Hurts and your Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers, and it's big name players as well as big name legends. But the coolest thing about Wild Card Football is, like I said, it's essentially a Mario football game. You have these different power-ups and different abilities, and they're laid out in the form of a card deck. And you can, use the ability to become a giant, and you're stepping on the different defenders, or, use a shield, or increase the speed, or increase the accuracy. And so there's like a strategic element that's on offer with Wildcard Football that I wasn't expecting it to be nearly as in-depth as it is. So yeah, if you're looking for a more arcadey football style experience, if you liked the NFL Streets of old, and you like the Mario sports style games, and you're looking to play some couch co-op with some buddies, this is a damn good option that's on offer. That's a departure from the kind of annualized Madden releases. And next up, let's talk about a game that I don't think technically came out this year. I think the physical release just came out this year, so it was the first time I ever played it, and it might have been the first time it released on console this year, if I'm not mistaken. And that is Game Deck Definitive Edition. And think of Disco Elysium, but in a futuristic world where you are a detective of VR. So you're hopping into these VR worlds and trying to solve mysteries and crimes and murders and shit like that in these VR worlds. And it's all, choice-based with multiple endings and branching narrative pathways, all the stuff you would want from, a Disco Elysium style experience. But my favorite thing about this game is that they don't have to rely on one setting. With that idea of being a detective of these VR worlds, you're constantly being transported to new and unique locations. So everything you're seeing from mission to mission is totally different. You're going to a sci-fi world, a grimy kind of criminal underbelly, on the streets. You're going to a fantasy style level, and then you have the real world mixed in there as well. And even, there's like a Western world with a little farming mini game thrown in there. There's a lot on offer with Game Deck Definitive Edition, and the story's just legitimately good. It's a legitimately good story. And next up we have Trepang 2. And if you guys played Fear back in the day, this is as close to a Fear clone that you will ever get in your life. Just a horror first person shooter that is gory as shit. You got your cloaking ability and your slow down ability, badass dismemberment. The only thing that really is a huge departure from Fear was one of the easiest first person shooters I've ever played in my life. Trepang 2 is not. It definitely has its difficulty spikes, so be warned about that. It can be very frustrating. Alright, and the last horror game that we're going to talk about here today in this video is Daymare 1994. Daymare 1998 came out in 2020, I believe, and this is the prequel to Daymare 1998, and you don't have to play 1998 to play 1994. It's pretty much its own story. But I enjoyed this game, 1994, much more than 1998. It's much more polished. A real focus on cinematics and the storytelling. I was really surprised by how well done the cinematics were and how much of a focus they were throughout the entire game. Daymare 1994 relies a lot more on a freeze ability that you get early on, where you freeze these enemies and they're like lightning quick, the enemies. So you need that freeze ability to avoid just being totally swarmed and bombarded and unable to progress. I still don't think the gameplay is great by any means, but I do think it's much better than the first game. I do think that the idea of freezing enemies and slowing down the game and just taking them out one by one, I think that was an interesting mechanic to add into the mix. And yeah, I appreciate the fact that they're so obviously inspired by Resident Evil, and they stay true to the roots of their inspiration and kind of deviate and zig and zag a little bit and go into their own direction. And now they have their own lore and their own world that they've created that I'm pretty much invested in. Anything they put out, I'll be there to check out. And last but certainly not least, and the only reason I'm putting it last is because I haven't finished it yet, that is Stray Gods. They call this a role-playing musical game, and I think that's a pretty fitting description. It's a musical, and I was very hesitant going into it. But the one thing I will say is, for as much of a musical as it is, and it is a musical, and it's a good musical, I just don't really like musicals. I was very thankful to see, though, early on, I think it makes a clear effort to show you there's going to be a lot more just natural dialogue than there is going to be musical acts being performed. But the coolest thing about this game is that all of the musical ballads are interactable, and you can kind of swap out the lyrics, and that will lead to different reactions from different people. And that's where a lot of the branching paths come from, is you picking different options in the lyrics. And so you're essentially creating your own songs throughout this game. And so there's tons of different variants for all of these songs. It's a really ambitious attempt at creating a narrative in just a totally different way. And you got Troy Baker in the game, and Laura Bailey and Ashley Johnson. I mean, you got some high caliber voice actors who have been in the industry for a hot minute. They're all doing a damn good job with their singing. It's really impressive. But yeah, I haven't finished that one yet. I definitely want to before the end of the year. I'm going to try to. There's still a few other games that are on my backlog, 2023 releases, that I want to check out. And as much as I do enjoy Stray Gods, at the end of the day, it does have a lot of those musical elements that I'm not always in the mood for, so at times it can be hard to kind of to get me in the spirit to boot that up. But yeah, man, that is going to be it for the video. Those are the most underrated games of 2023 that I have played personally. Hit me in the comments with your list, anything that I did not recommend here that you think are some of the most underrated games of 2023. Make sure to let your voice be heard down below. But yeah, man, stay tuned. Like I said, 2023 Game of the Year rankings coming very soon, as well as your own rankings, your own community vote. It will be represented in my end year awards. I'll probably do my awards show first and then do my game of the year ranking last to cap off the year in its entirety. But yeah, man, thank you all for tuning in. I hope you were all having an excellent holiday season. And yeah, take it easy, guys. Until next time, I will catch you in the next video. Goodbye.